What's up everybody? It's John here again today. Many people ask me, what is the key to being driven? Or they say, John, I just can't get myself to be motivated. Or parents even ask me, how do I get my kid motivated? That one I get a lot. So it's no surprise that it's important to know the key to being driven. Now this is a huge topic, so I'm going to be breaking down this topic into 4 videos, which will be coming out in the next few days. So here we go. This is the first part of the mini-series behind the science on how to spark inspiration and motivation. As I said in another video discussing finding ideal careers, and you can check it out in the cards up there, it is critical to be motivated about what you do to feel satisfaction. Some people say what's most important is to make money, but many things can make you money. You can rob people and make money, so that doesn't mean much. Therefore, the key to being driven and motivated lies in tapping into intrinsic motivation, a topic which I've previously published in a peer-reviewed journal in education about. I'll drop a link in the description below if you want to read up on it. Now, there are 2 types of motivation, extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation was popularized by Brian Skinner's operant conditioning, and it's pretty much the carrot and stick approach. So the carrot approach is whenever someone does something desirable, you give them a reward. The stick approach is when someone does something undesirable, you give them a punishment. In comparison, intrinsic motivation is that which is intrinsically satisfying. So people do things because they feel it is something that they want to do, they like to do, and they enjoy doing. Public intellectuals have used self-determination theory by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan at the University of Rochester to understand intrinsic motivation. For example, some landmark books are Alfie Kohn's Punished by Rewards in the field of education and Daniel Pink's Drive in general motivational writing. However, when we compare intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, their effects, their usage, and how impactful they are in different situations is quite different. So in Daniel Pink's book, Drive, he separates 2 types of tasks. One which is called algorithmic tasks, and the other one which is called heuristic tasks. Algorithmic activities are rote tasks which are repeated behaviors that don't take up too much mental capacity. Extrinsic motivation is effective in encouraging that type of activity. That's why extrinsic motivational methods are used for pet training and factory labor. So for example, if your pet does something desirable, you feed them some snacks. If they do something undesirable, then you do other things to make them understand that that behavior is undesirable. Same thing for factory workers. If you want them to produce more, then you pay them more and they'll put more time and effort into increasing their output. However, that is mostly effective when things are very straightforward and don't require a lot of mental capacity. So if it's in an assembly line situation, it's pretty much, okay, hammer faster, or screw this screw faster. On the other hand, heuristic activities involve problem solving. There is no set script to follow, so you have to come up with something new every time to solve the problem. And intrinsic motivation is important to encouraging this type of activity. With the modern economy and the developments in AI and robotics, algorithmic activities are at the highest risk of being replaced. I actually talked about this with Dr. Alistair Johnson from MIT in one of the podcast episodes, which I'll link above. Now, having said that about intrinsic motivation, it is also extremely important to avoid solely extrinsic motivation for reasons that I'll discuss later. Therefore, in this video, I'm going to emphasize the importance of tapping into intrinsic motivation because a lot of the jobs in the future are heuristically oriented. They're the ones that are least likely to be replaced by robots and AI. Therefore, soft skills in the future become super important, and I discussed this with my friend Professor Riza Hazmath in the video above, so check out the card. So without further ado, let me explain the story behind intrinsic motivation and why it is important to you. So the idea of intrinsic motivation really began from Harry Harlow's experiment with rhesus monkeys. What he did was he put a very simple puzzle, which was essentially a pin into the board, and then there's a hook, and then you can open the board, right? Now, at that time, motivation in the psychological literature was mostly about drives, right? There's internal drives which are biological, which include food, water, rest, shelter, and copulation. And the other type of drive was external, so meaning rewards and punishments. So what happened was when Harry Harlow put the puzzle into the cage with the monkeys, they started playing with it. And they looked like they were actually enjoying themselves. The fact that these monkeys were genuinely interested and looked like they were having fun with the puzzle was a revelation. So Harlow at that time proposed the term intrinsic motivation. So to further test the idea, he decided to add raisins to the test. And what he found was that the monkeys, when they were rewarded with raisins, they actually made more mistakes and did worse in the puzzle. And so he was like, this doesn't make sense. The fact that the puzzle was intrinsically satisfying to play, and then if you add raisins to it, it should make it even more fun to play. His results didn't really support that because the monkeys actually did worse. So I proposed this idea to the psychological community at that time, and it was largely rejected because the establishment simply could not take such a new idea. And so the idea of intrinsic motivation was put off for 20 years until Edward Deci at Carnegie Mellon at that time, doing his doctorate research in the 60s, he decided to do an experiment involving the Soma puzzle. It's a 3D puzzle with blocks where you can assemble the blocks in different ways so that you can reproduce the image you see on a card. So you'll pull out a card and you'll see a sofa, and you try to put the puzzle together to become a sofa. So for Edward Deci to do the experiment, he invited two groups of people to work on the Soma puzzle. One group was told that they'd be compensated for completing it, while the other group was not told anything. They were just told, do the puzzle. So the experiment was set up like this. When the subjects entered the room, Edward Deci would tell them, hey, do the puzzle and we'll time it. And afterwards, I need to take the data out of the room and crunch the numbers on a computer in another room. But what he actually did was he left the room and went to an adjacent room, and in the room next door was a one-way mirror, and through that one-way mirror he gets to observe the subject for 8 minutes. And that's actually when the experiment really begins. So he made sure to set up the room so that there are other distractions, right? There are things that would attract the individual from doing the Soma puzzle. So he put some magazines there, which included a Time magazine, a New Yorker, and a Playboy magazine. Essentially, the experiment was observing them. So the experiment goes on for 3 days. On the first day, there was no mention of pay. Both groups were asked to do the puzzle, and then he went out to crunch the numbers and he observed them, and basically people averaged 3 to 4 minutes where they continued to play with the puzzle, and then they kind of went on and did their own thing. On the second day, Group A, the group that was paid, was told that they would be paid $1, which is equivalent to $6 today. And so he timed them, and they did things faster, and they were more eager. And when he left the room and observed them from next door, they actually spent 4 to 5 minutes more to play with the puzzle because they wanted to get a head start when he came back. On the other hand, Group B, the group that would not be paid, on the second day, they just played with the puzzle and sort of did the same thing, except they played for a little longer. On the third day, Group A was told, hey, we've run out of budget, we could only pay you for 1 day, so just do the puzzle anyways. And for Group A, their playing time dropped severely. And it dropped to below the length of the first day. So they played for like about 2 minutes and it was like, okay, forget it, I'm not getting paid for this. On the other hand, Group B, who was not to be paid, they increased their playing time to 5 minutes. So as it turns out, people who were told that they'd be paid ended up playing less on the third day, while the ones who were not told they'd be rewarded continued to work on the puzzle, and they ended up playing even more. At that time, this was groundbreaking research because operant conditioning by Brian Skinner, the carrot and stick approach, was the dominant paradigm at the time. And it purported that people only do things when they're encouraged with external rewards. However, this experiment showed that this was not the case. And it led to the rise of a growing body of research on intrinsic motivation, which has built up to be quite substantial today. And the findings of intrinsic motivation has been applied to many different fields now. For example, management literature has found that more money increases algorithmic activity production, but not heuristic activity. In fact, what they found was adding money to the equation actually decreases motivation. And these findings have been further supported by positive psychology on how there is a limit to how much money can motivate people. For example, it's important to support a baseline salary in this day and age in the city would be around $60,000 to $80,000 so that people don't starve. Happiness basically plateaus. So for example, if money makes you happy like this, after it hits 60 to 80, 80K, it comes like this, right? It doesn't increase your happiness too much after it hits a certain threshold. And therefore, what we know about motivation today is that it is essential to provide an environment that supports the elements, the essential ingredients of intrinsic motivation, which is a topic of my next videos. I'll be explaining the 3 keys to intrinsic motivation with the acronym CAR, so C-A-R. So make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell to be informed when the next videos come out. And leave a comment below and let me know what you think about intrinsic motivation and what you do to get yourself motivated. And don't forget to like and share. Take care, everybody.